Hello, I'm Elizabeth Cronin at the National Mass Violence Center. Today, we're learning about planning for a mass violence incident using volunteers. This presentation is part of the National Mass Violence Center's MVI SNAPS, a virtual educational series designed to provide brief, skills-focused presentations about an array of topics relevant to mass violence, including preparation, response, recovery, and resilience. Each SNAP will focus on 2, 3, or 4 specific objectives or takeaways. Today's SNAPS webinar focuses on how important it is for communities to have a plan for the use of volunteers in a mass violence response. This includes understanding who you may need, where to utilize their skills, how to manage those volunteers, and what training you should need to provide them. We are grateful to the Office for Victims of Crime for its support of the SNAPS webinar program. So here are the learning objectives for today's presentation. In this webinar, you will learn about the value of using volunteers in a mass violence incident response, how to identify the needs that can be filled by volunteers and who can fill those roles, and describe the best practices for volunteer management. Also, understanding the importance of planning for the use of volunteers. No one wants to think that a mass violence incident can occur in their community, but mass violence incidents can occur anywhere at any time. Unfortunately, all communities are at risk for mass violence and must consider the possibility of these tragedies striking close to home. So, how can a community prepare for a mass violence incident? Taking the first steps to creating a victim-centered plan can seem daunting, but there is an evidence-based method for developing a plan that provides a roadmap for moving forward called the 16 Best Practices. One important aspect of your plan should include volunteer management. The 16 Best Practices were developed by subject matter experts who found that many mass violence incidents had similarities, and the lessons learned from collective experiences resulted in the creation of these best practices. One of these is volunteer management. Having a plan to appropriately utilize and manage volunteers will result in a much more effective and efficient response that will meet the needs of victims, survivors, first responders, and families. Volunteers can be critical in any mass violence response. However, to best serve those most impacted by the incident, there must be a plan for how to utilize the volunteers safely and effectively. As we know from past experiences, well-meaning people often step up in the aftermath of tragedy, but allowing people to self-deploy without training and without a plan can result in negative outcomes and chaos. So who are the volunteers? Depending on the scope and scale of the incident, you will likely need volunteers in a variety of different roles. The use of volunteers will be most needed at the Friends and Relatives Center, the FRC, and the Family Assistance Center, the FAC. The FRC is usually open within hours to a day following a mass violence incident, and then the FAC will be open from about 48 hours following the incident to about 2 weeks, although this will always vary depending on need. You can find more information about these centers on our website and viewing our town hall on the 3 centers. Volunteers can provide administrative assistance, registration, navigation through the center services, childcare, comfort, crisis counselors, spiritual care, transportation, interpretation services, information, logistical and technology support, legal assistance, and pet and service animal support. Not everyone who accesses the centers will need all these services, but providing the broadest options will serve those impacted by the MVI in every way possible. Now let's talk about volunteer self-deployment. Volunteer self-deployment, while well-meaning, can undermine safety, security, and support for survivors and families. Self-deployment may create safety risks, operational disruption, and potential harm. A mass violence response must be tightly controlled, staffed, and credentialed to protect everyone involved. Responders must know who is on site to maintain security and confidentiality. There must be accountability of those at the centers who are credentialed and screened to avoid the risk of resource mismatch. Improperly trained or untrained individuals may cause unintentional harm, disrupt operations, and create privacy breaches. Further, self-deployed volunteers can create liability concerns and divert resources meant for others. So, a volunteer management plan should include determining what types of volunteers will be needed, where they will be deployed, and for how long. Most importantly, someone should be designated to coordinate volunteers and delegate tasks to them, and there should be a clear line of professional supervision for all volunteers. Public service announcements will have to be made about the number and types of volunteers that are needed, how long the commitment will be, and where they will be deployed. Roles and responsibilities should be determined ahead of time, depending on level of skills and ability to commit. Short job descriptions should be created. There should also be some training provided, including orientation to the FRC or FAC and the services offered. A registration and credentialing process should be developed before an incident occurs. Establish a clear intake process, collect names, contact information, skills and availability, and whether they have crisis or trauma training. You may require background checks or another screening process. Ask for resumes of past volunteer experience, especially expertise in victim survivor assistance and mental and behavioral health. Ideally, known volunteers should be utilized to the extent possible, particularly those who are already experienced or trained in crisis or trauma response. Many victim assistance programs funded through the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime have staff with this training. So here are some things to keep in mind. Another critical aspect of volunteer management is to triage and prioritize volunteers and schedules. Understand their skill levels, whether you need them immediately or may call on them later, and be creative in finding ways to deploy volunteers for different tasks as the needs arise. Tip sheets developed by the National Mass Violence Center can be helpful as you create your plans. You can check out our website at www.nmvvrc.org. We are so thankful to people for their willingness to step up and offer their time and expertise when a mass violence incident occurs. But it is critical that managers do everything they can to avoid volunteer burnout and secondary trauma to which everyone who responds to an incident is subject to. Managers should ensure that volunteers are not overscheduled, they are provided breaks, and encouraged to practice self-care. If possible, private areas should be offered for rest and nourishment. Having sufficient volunteers available can avoid some of the overload of all those who are providing services and support. Ensure that volunteers know they are appreciated and a critical component of any response. In the end, a successful response to a mass violence incident begins with a robust plan that includes volunteers in a variety of roles. Following an incident, resources can be quickly overwhelmed, and volunteers are an essential part of filling gaps and providing needed services. Success depends on understanding the roles and responsibilities and effective volunteer management so that victims, survivors, and families are getting the most comprehensive quality services and support. Nothing is more important than that. In closing, we hope that the information provided in this SNAPS webinar is helpful to you. Let us know your thoughts about this program or provide us ideas for future ones. All SNAPS webinars are posted on our website at nmvvrc.org and icptta.com. Thank you so much for participating in this MVI SNAPS webinar.